Good day everyone, I am Kay Francisco and for today I am going to talk about the three components of personality by Sigmund Freud. But before any of that, let us first know who is Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was an Austrian neurologist who developed psychoanalysis, a method through which an analyst unpacks unconscious conflicts based on the free associations, dreams, and fantasies of the patient. His theories on child sexuality, libido, and the ego, among other topics, were some of the most influential academic concepts of the 20th century. According to Freud, there are three basic structures of personality: the id, ego, and superego. These elements work together to create complex behaviors and have a powerful influence on individuals. Each of these elements of personality emerge at different points in life, although each part of the personality comprises unique features. They interact to form a whole, and that interaction makes a relative contribution to one's behavior. The first component is the id. The id acts as the driving force of personality. It only not strives to fulfill the most basic urges that people have, many of which are tied directly to survival. It also provides all the energy necessary to drive personality. The id is the source of all psychic energy, making it the primary component of personality. It is the only component of personality that is present from birth. The id acts as the driving force of personality. So it is the unconscious part of your personality. A child is born with the id. It's basically the childish and impulsive part of you that just does what it wants or gets what it wants without thinking of the consequences. Nothing else matters to the id except the satisfaction of its own needs, regardless of the reality um, and the consequences. If it wants something, it must get something no matter what. So let's say for an instance, a baby is hungry, so the id wants food or milk, so the baby would cry, or until such time that he or she is given with what he or she wants. So this explains why a baby does not have a sense of time. The baby does not mind the people around him. The baby would cry any time of the day or any time of the or any time of the night because he's hungry, uncomfortable, or sleepy. And it doesn't consider anyone on anything because if the id wants something, it wants it fast because that's what it does. It operates on a pleasurable principle, always wants to increase pleasure and decrease pain. It responds directly and immediately to basic urges, needs, and desires regardless of the consequences. That's why, according to Freud, the id is illogical, it's unreasonable, and it's primitive. Um, Answering modules. In this case, the id will give us thoughts like, why would I make my modules? It makes my life difficult. I cannot do other things more important and pleasurable than modules. So the id would also put pressure in us and would tell us and would make us come up or do other more pleasurable activities than module making or answering modules, like surfing on the internet and watching movies. So if you give in to the id, then you would never do your modules and do pleasurable things instead. And now let's move on to the ego. The ego operates from the reality principle, which works to satisfy the id's desires in the most reasonable and realistic ways. It is the part of the id which has been modified with the direct influence of the external world, component of personality that is responsible for dealing with reality. It geared towards problem solving and reality testing, enabling the person to maintain self control. As the child grows, the child wants to mingle with the people around him, and he learns how to relate more to the environment that he is in, and that he is directly influenced as well by the outside factors or by the external world. So here is where ego develops, because according to Freud, the ego is a decision-making component of the personality. If the id operates on pleasure, the ego is the decision-making component of the personality. So let's go back to our example regarding the answering of module. So if the ego is stronger than that of the id by you are torn between answering your modules or not, the ego will tell you to do your module because that is what you're supposed to do. That is the right thing to be done, because if you will not answer the module, you will be reprimanded by your teachers or you will eventually fail. So the ego operates on reality principle, and it helps you to do things that are acceptable by the society. So the ego enables the person to control his or her impulses and demonstrate its self-control. And it helps a person decide on things basically because it always chooses what is acceptable by the society. And the last component is the superego. It is the component of personality composed of the internalized ideals that we have acquired from our parents and society. The superego works to suppress the urges of the id and tries to make the ego behave morally rather than realistically. It incorporates the values and morals of society in which are learned from one's parents and others. The superego holds the internalized moral standards and ideals that we acquire from our parents and society, our sense of right and wrong. The superego provides guidelines for making judgments. Superego. It is your morality. So your superego controls the id's impulses and persuades the ego to be more realistic and moralistic. The superego consists of two systems, the conscience and the ego ideal. The conscience includes information about things that are viewed as bad by parents and society, while the ego ideal is the part of the superego that includes the rules and standards for good behaviors. Conscience can punish the ego through causing feelings of guilt. So if the ego gives in to the desire of the id, the superego will make the person feel guilty or feel bad about the happening. While the ideal self or ego ideal is an imaginary picture of how you ought to be and represents career aspirations, how to treat other people, and at the same time, how to behave as a member of society where you belong. How to treat other people, and at the same time, how to treat other people, and at the same time, how to behave as a member of society where you belong. Yes, I finished answering module. I'm so happy with myself. I'm so proud of myself because I did my module despite the fact that there were so many temptations. It gives you the sense of pride, but if you did follow to what the id says, it would give you the feeling of guilt. Like, oh, I'm such a terrible student. I was not able to answer my module. It gives you the sense of pride once you follow what it wants, but it gives you the sense of guilt if you do otherwise. The ideal self and conscience are largely determined in childhood from the inculcated parental values. It's really very important that parents are supportive of their kids and not being too strict to them. And that's basically the role of the parents. They have they have to love their kids, the love that's enough to let them grow, be happy, and be morally upright. What happens if there is an imbalance? Freud believed that an imbalance between these elements would lead to a maladapted personality. Let's say an individual with an overly dominant id might become impulsive, uncontrollable, or even criminal. Such an individual acts upon their most basic urges with no concern for whether their behavior is appropriate, acceptable, or legal. On the other hand, an overly dominant superego might lead to a personality that is extremely moralistic and judgmental. A person ruled by the superego might not be able to accept anything or anyone that they perceive to be bad or immoral. Freud's personality theory was influenced by earlier ideas about the mind working at conscious and unconscious levels. Freud believed that early childhood experiences are filtered through the id, ego, and superego, and it is the way an individual handles these experiences, both consciously and unconsciously, that shapes personality in adulthood. So, to wrap things up, let us remember that the id is the primitive and instinctual part of the mind. It takes the drives, the desires, and the wants. The superego operates as a moral conscience, and the ego is the realistic part that mediates between the desires of the id and the superego.